Thank you, Chair. So, moving to a future where electric vehicles are the norm presents many challenges, both technical and social. And Cambridge City Council only has control over some aspects of the transition. So, this strategy document really sets out the key areas where we can act and the actions that are identified in this area that we are taking. But it also sets out who the other stakeholders are, who hold pieces of the electric charging infrastructure puzzle, who needs to do what the regulatory structure is, and so on. And it hopefully does it in a way that's accessible both to members and members of the public, so that we can see the whole picture and see what our position is in it, as well as setting the tone for supporting that transition. So the appended strategy document sets out Cambridge City Council's commitment to supporting the uptake of electric vehicles and, where able, actively installing or requiring installation of the necessary infrastructure to support that transition.
Thank you so much, Joe. So let's be clear, of course, Peter and Friend, you're not allowed to ask questions during this debate. So, councillors, over to you. Any questions? Comments?
Sorry, Chair, just to explain who I am. I'm Ian Cray, and I've been working with Peter on this for some time. I'm a member of Transition, so I'm a friend, but I'm also a member of the group.
Thanks for making that clear, and I should have asked when I spoke to you earlier, so thanks for that. Thank you. So, councillors, questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Collis.
I appreciate the point about robustly considering EV as a preference for all City Council fleet replacement. I just wonder if you could give a bit more information on how much further we have to go with that replacement process, please.
So just hang on, Joe, we'll collect questions up, I think. So, any more questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Martinelli.
So I've got a few. So I was just wondering, looking at the essentially the performance indicators at the end of the report, one of the objectives is that we should essentially look at provision of electric vehicle charging within the sort of council's housing stock. So it's aim number 3, including the wider property holdings. Looking at the metrics, I can see that there are very important metrics for the car park spaces within the council-run car parks. I was just wondering whether another performance indicator for that aim could be the proportion of council property holdings that have access to an EV charging space, to actually measure that aim. I was also going to comment actually based on the public question about the car club EV spaces. Obviously, I think it seems like a very good idea, and whilst no one here is going to be able to comment on the specifics of whether a particular place in a corridor is appropriate or not, I was wondering, given as you say this is a county idea, whether there would be any scope for us as a committee to write to the county council and say we think we should be considering EV spaces for the car club, given it's a collaborative venture. So that's the comments I had really.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more? Yes, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Matthews.
Just referring to the national context on page 34, where it mentions there are a few other authorities throughout the UK really pioneering the EV space. I've got London, Oxford, Dundee, Nottingham, Bristol, Milton Keynes and York. Just wondering whether we're looking as a council to engage within these specific places, working with them to sort of take their learnings, best practices, but also to take some of our points from this EV strategy and maybe just build that bridge, if there isn't one already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Chair. A question about the charge points provision on page just up to point 6 of the supplementary of the appendix. So it goes into some detail about making sure that there's certain numbers of charge points per dwelling, which I think is excellent. One problem I wonder if it is being considered that we're seeing in my ward in Trumpington is that the number of cars people have doesn't necessarily go along with what was designed when the estates were built. That will become even more of a problem if people then can't charge their cars if people are parking in the wrong spaces. So I was just wondering what the enforcement plan is around that to make sure people have access to these spaces if these points are being provided.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question about the progress of discussions with Stagecoach with a view to encouraging them to accelerate uptake of EV for buses. Thanks.
Councillor. That's all. So, Joe, could you reply to this question, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I will do my best to answer the questions, but one of the purposes of this particular document is to show how many people are involved in delivering this and that they all have various roles to play and so on. I come at it from an air quality point of view, and so I have a limit to what my involvement is in these. I'm involved in some of the projects. But so to take your point first, Councillor Collis, so my understanding is that we are currently undergoing a fleet review, and the provision of EV fleet is quite significant within that review, and that there will be a framework put forward for how we select vehicles, dependent on them first meeting our operational needs and then on whole life costs. And whole life costs are very important when considering electric vehicles because they have a high upfront cost and they have a very low running cost. And so actually in the long term they may be a good purchase, and it's having a framework put together to make that happen that I understand is the real issue there. Councillor Martinelli, on the metrics, I've concentrated on metrics for things that we are already committed to, and so are deliverable within a sort of foreseeable time frame. I take your point about council house provision. I think it's an important thing that we will need to pursue, but it's not early on the list, it's not fleshed out yet, but it needs more work. And the way the strategy is structured is that it will be partly the art of the possible. So where funding can be found, projects will be taken forward and they will be scrutinised in the normal sort of project management way within the City Council, and then metrics will probably be set. So I don't see this as a completely fixed document. There will be metrics developed as projects develop, because implementing infrastructure like this, which is an enormous transition, needs to evolve. So on your other point about car club spaces, as I've said, we will try and facilitate this where we can. We are already in a new contract for car club with Enterprise, and as part of that contract they've got commitments to bring electric vehicles forward within that car club, and we're already in discussions with them, with our car park colleagues who are running that contract, to look at how we can facilitate the charging infrastructure we have got to support electric taxis, to support early uptake. So there's a number of schemes, there are a number of projects where we are trying to champion access for the car club cars to electric charge points. So, Councillor Matthews, on your point about engaging with other cities, I've been fortunate enough to visit Dundee. The cities I listed out got significant central government funding, a very small subset of cities that got sort of £5 or more million to trial a lot of EV charging infrastructure. Dundee was one of those. I've been to see how they've installed charging hubs up there and have a good dialogue with them. Also in constant contact with the team at Oxford, who are doing a lot of interesting things, and I was in Oxford on Monday talking to them. So we are sharing learning. The Office for Low Emission Vehicles, that has provided the base funding for those projects and for our taxi charge point project, have networked us a little bit, so we do have those links there. So, Councillor Somerville, your point about parking, this is obviously a very difficult issue. It's very, very straightforward for owner-occupiers who have drive space to avail themselves of government subsidies for charge points and get charging on their properties. on-street is a very difficult issue, and I think that's acknowledged in the strategy. And as I've said, the on-street space is managed and regulated by the Transport Authority, not the City Council. And so there are both social, technical and practical aspects to delivering on-street charging. Some of the other places that we've just mentioned are going down a very different route for providing people who don't have their own driveway with charge points through hub charging, where you have very rapid charging consolidated in a sort of petrol station situation. But I think that a combination of on-street and hubs ultimately will provide for that group of people. Councillor Shield, discussions with Stagecoach. So, electrification of the bus fleet is obviously something that is wider than City Council influence. There are many discussions about how public transport access and subsidy and restrictions are going to be taken forward through the Greater Cambridge Partnership. That's something that's set out also in the strategy. I've had some discussions with Stagecoach, who are very open-minded about a transition to electric buses. In fact, and there's a reference which I've put in this report right at the end, which was an announcement 2 weeks ago, I believe, by all of the very major bus operators in the UK, saying they would not buy any diesel buses after 2025. So there's really a statement of intent by the whole bus industry to move in this direction. But we would obviously like to make that happen as soon as possible. And we're working through various networks and partnerships with the other authorities to try and make that happen.
Thanks very much for that, Joe. Thank you. Very good. Do you want to say anything to Rosie, or are you happy to?
Just very quickly, just on the fleet replacement, just to say that we wouldn't be sort of replacing vehicles until they're up for replacement, so we wouldn't do a sort of wholesale move to electric, but we are looking as vehicles need replacing. We've done it where we can, but that's all been the smaller vehicles, so with some of the bigger ones, it's not electric, isn't available, but we are looking into it.
Okay, thanks so much. So the recommendations are this one. 2.1 and 2.2, I'll presume I can take them together, hopefully. So I won't leave them out there. Hopefully you've all got them in front of you. So all those in favour of approving those recommendations, 2.1 and 2.2. That's all, Jeff. Thank you very much. And Councillor Moore, do you accept the recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay.